Today's talk is titled Be Who You Are by Peter Friedricks, to be read by Donn Howell, our newly installed UUCC president. Donn?
My goodness. Well, thank you all. This is quite a crowd. Thank you all for coming out in this rather inclement weather. Wonderful to see you. While searching for material, in the back there, if you can't hear me, just raise your hands. Are you okay? Yeah? Not quite? How's this? Better? Good. While searching for material for our services, Randy Schwalbe found this sermon in the treasure trove of published services that the UUA maintains on its website. He showed the sermon to me, Be Who You Are, by Reverend Peter Friedricks. Reverend Friedricks' sermon so spoke to me and had such relevance to my own life that I wanted to share it with you all. And indeed, Be Who You Are seems to me a good thought with which to approach this new year. But before we begin, let's have a little background information. Peter Friedricks, let me tell you a little about him. He is a UU pastor who retired in 2022 after serving for 16 years as lead minister for the UU congregation of Delaware County in Media, Pennsylvania. This sermon, Be Who You Are, was published on the UUA website in 2015. After retirement, Friedricks relocated to Keene, New Hampshire, where he lives with his wife of 42 years. More, okay. Currently, he is a member of the board. Let me try this. Currently, he is a member of the board of the New Hampshire Alliance for End-of-Life Options. Turning now to Forest Church, Be Who You Are is the third and final sermon in a series that Reverend Friedricks delivered honoring Reverend Forest Church. Reverend Church passed away in 2009, some 15 years ago. Enough time has passed that some of you may not be familiar with his work, so let me fill out the picture of Forest Church with a short biography. Excuse me. Forrest was born in Palo Alto, California in 1948, while his father, Frank Church, was a student at Stanford Law School. Following his father's graduation in 1950, the family returned to Boise, Idaho. Frank Church was elected to the United States Senate in 1956 and served 4 terms until January of 1981. Frank's son, Forrest Church, was a graduate of Stanford University and Harvard Divinity School. He received a PhD in early church history from Harvard University in 1978. He served for almost 3 decades as senior minister and minister of public theology at All Souls Unitarian Church in New York City. Between 1985 and his death in 2009, he wrote or edited 25 books. These include technical studies of Christian and Gnostic literature, as well as over a dozen books addressing a wider audience. The first reading this morning, we heard Forest Church's extended metaphor of the world as a cathedral with many varied windows. During the course of Reverend Friedrichs' sermon, we'll encounter another of Church's window metaphors. In addition to Forest Church, Friedrichs also refers to another person whose ideas and words that he's included in this sermon, Parker Palmer. Parker Palmer is an American Quaker author, educator, and activist who focuses on issues in education, community leadership, spirituality, and social change. He has published 10 books and numerous essays and poems, and is founder and senior partner emeritus of the Center for Courage and Renewal. And now, the sermon, Be Who You Are, a sermon by Reverend Peter Friedricks. As part of my seminary training, I spent a summer working as a hospital chaplain assigned to the psychiatric floor, and I found it to be deeply gratifying work. I was able to build relationships with many of the patients. Some were long-term and others had a quick turnaround. Some were what we called bouncers. These were people who would be admitted to the unit because of some behavioral issue. Oftentimes, they had simply gone off their meds and needed to be restabilized, treated, and then released. But within a matter of days or weeks, they'd bounce back. In the course of my 8 weeks at the hospital, some patients bounced several times. My favorite bouncer was Rose. Rose was a lovely woman who was about 80 years old who suffered from schizophrenia. Rose would be brought to the unit very agitated and aggressive. But within a day or so, with the proper medications, she'd be sweet as a peach. Rose and I had many long conversations about God and love and heaven, and she was rock solid in her Baptist faith. During one of our conversations, Rose expressed to me her concern about all the people who were interviewing and examining her. She was tired of being treated like a lab rat and told me that she was afraid to talk to the doctors. I tried to reassure her that they were there to help her, and I suggested that she be honest with them in answering their questions. Just be yourself, I told her, and they'll take good care of you. Rose's response to my sage advice was a priceless gem that I'll never forget. Be myself, she said. Of course I've got to be myself. Everybody else is already taken. Today is the third and final sermon in our series honoring Reverend Forrest Church, the pastor of All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in New York City for 30 years. Last month, we sat with the first two parts of the mantra which he claimed served him well as he faced his death. Want what you have, and do what you can. Be who you are is the third leg of this stool, an equally simple statement. Let me first give you a short refresher on the first two statements before we dive into the third. When church urges us to want what we have, he is not telling us to settle, but he's reminding us that even when things look grim, there is much to be thankful for. He uses the metaphor of a window with many panes of glass, each pane representing one of the many aspects of our lives: our health, our job, our relationships. When one pane gets clouded over, he tells us, we must resist the urge to press our noses against that darkened pane to the exclusion of all others. Instead, we should step back to allow the light from all the other panes to filter through. Church tells us to engage in thoughtful wishing rather than wishful thinking, and thus to be grateful for all the gifts in our lives. To do what we can is to recognize both our own power and our own limitations. Excuse me. He writes that doing what you can means doing all you can, no more and no less. It's not just mucking by, but it's not trying to do more than you can do either, not stretching yourself out so far that you can't help but force a failure. When we do what we can, we seek to achieve the significant goals that lie within our power. And while we may risk failure, we don't set ourselves up for certain defeat. And now we find ourselves face to face with the church's third admonition: be who you are. This is, he admits, the hardest task of all. Simply put, he tells us, to be who you are is not to fake your existence. He writes that each of us is unique, with unique flaws and gifts. The world doesn't owe us a living. We owe the world a living, our very own. In his book, Love and Death, Forrest Church tells of the opportunity he had as the son of the U.S. Senator Frank Church to enter politics while he was still working on his doctorate in theology. After running his father's presidential primary campaign in Nebraska, the son was ready to jump into the father's footsteps and run for public office himself. Fortunately, he listened to his father's advice to live his own life, not the life his father had led. And in doing so, writes the younger church, I found my calling. I answered a call that was mine, not someone else's. He goes on to tell us to envy another's skills, looks, or gifts, rather than embracing your own nature and call, is to fail in two respects. In trying unsuccessfully to be who we aren't, we fail to become who we are. Be who you are, as Rose pointed out, it's a rather inane concept. Of course you are who you are. You are who you are because everyone else is already taken. But if it's so simple, then why do we spend so much of our lives trying to be what we're not? Trying to be like someone else, or trying to be the someone else that someone else thinks or wants or makes us to believe that we should be. In the words of May Sarton's poem that we heard earlier, why do we spend so much of our lives dissolved and shaken, wearing other people's faces? To be who we are, who we were born to be, is no easy task. Consider for a moment our childhood and how we learn most of what we come to know. Although our intellect develops the ability to discuss and debate, our most basic form of learning is emulation. Or to put it in its simplest terms, copying. Like a giant game of follow the leader, we grow up watching what others do and observing the outcomes. If we like what we see, we try to do the same in hopes of gaining a similar result. From a very early age, we are wired to be like rather than to simply be. For some of us, this message is explicit. Why can't you be more like your brother or your sister or cousin or fill in the blank? Our media convince us that to be accepted or happy or successful, we need to act in a certain way, drive a certain car, marry a member of the opposite sex. There's a reason that the Rolling Stones song Satisfaction is still going strong some 55 years after its release. It speaks in part to the futility of trying to be the person that someone else thinks we should be. When I'm watching my TV and that man comes on to tell me how white my shirts can be, but he can't be a man because he doesn't smoke the same cigarettes as me, I try and I try and I try, but I can't get no satisfaction. Role models are invaluable to us, both at a societal and individual level. Excuse me. They serve to inspire us and to motivate us to consider what is possible. And there are certain traits or aspects of others that we should try to emulate. I grew up when Superman and Batman were all the rage on TV. And who can argue that we shouldn't work for truth, justice, and the American way? The danger comes, of course, when we try not to just be like our role models, but to become them. This is a recipe for disaster, a formula for failure. Neither you nor I will ever be more powerful than a locomotive or capable of leaping tall buildings in a single bound. So when we try to be like Mike, remember the Michael Jordan commercial, we are destined for disappointment. Even if it's not superheroes or pro athletes we try to model ourselves after. In Forrest Church's case, he came close to making the mistake of trying to become like his father, the powerful Senator Frank Church of Idaho. Sometimes the influences that exert their power over us are more subtle than this. We grow up in a family of achievers, and although nothing is explicitly stated, we incorporate the message that much is expected of us. A parent's well-intentioned action sends a signal of what they hope for us, and we receive the gesture consciously or subconsciously as a mandate. If you hear things like, oh, you're so good in math, you should become a scientist. If you hear that enough times as a child, you're likely to believe you should become a scientist, and that your passion for dance or music or social work is misplaced. By the same token, If over and over again you hear the message, you'll never amount to anything, that too becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The forces that dictate against being who we are powerful and many. To be who we are can be like swimming upstream against a strong current of expectations and what I call the tyranny of the shoulds. And as if these forces aren't enough to defeat us, to be who we are is made all the more challenging by our lack of self-knowledge and self-awareness. Perhaps the greatest challenge to living into Forest Church's mandate is to be who you are, is discovering just who and what that is. Living in the 21st century America, most of us are blessed with lives of comfort and relative ease. And so we can ask the question, who am I? What do I want to be when I grow up? Many of us spend years of our lives and thousands of dollars in therapy to discover the answers to those questions. And in finding them, some of us follow our bliss, to use Joseph Campbell's term, while others, constrained by factors such as fear, family, or finances, remain living a life that is not their own until our days run out. In his book, Let Your Life Speak, author and educator Parker Palmer tells of his journey of discovering his true self. He calls the true self the self planted in us by the God who made us in God's own image, the self that wants nothing more or less than for us to be who we were created to be. To embark on the journey to discover this God-given self takes courage and commitment. It is risky business. It requires us to shed the masks and the costumes that populate our closets, to strip down to our naked selves and take a close look in the mirror. There, we are called to see ourselves, and perhaps more challenging yet, to claim ourselves, warts and all. Palmer puts it this way: I know myself to be a person of weakness and of strength, liability and giftedness, darkness and light. I now know that to be whole means to reject none of it, but to embrace all of it. Now, this might seem like terribly narcissistic navel-gazing, but it is imperative that we discover our true selves and claim our wholeness in order to fulfill that other mandate we received from Forest Church, to do what we can. When we fail to discover our true selves, when we cling to the personae that are nothing more than the masks we wear or the fulfillment of the expectations of others, it is easy to simply remain victims of our own condition. We are disempowered puppets, actors playing out a script of our own, not of our own making. We blame God or our parents or our partners for our circumstances. But when we do the hard work of discovering our true and authentic selves, of claiming our whole selves, we are called to live into those selves, of embracing one's wholeness. Parker Palmer writes, makes life more demanding, because once you do that, you must live your whole life. You must, in the words of Forest Church, be who you are. Now, the good news is it's never too late. It's never too late to start the journey of self-discovery, of shedding the skin that we've worn since our birth, like an ill-fitting suit, never felt quite right. May Sarton is testament to this fact. When she wrote the words, "Now there is time, and time is young," she was 83 years old. It was at this chronologically advanced age that she discovered her true self and finally felt her own weight and density. To be who you are is to offer to the world the greatest gift we can give, to invest our lives and all we do with sincerity, authenticity, and deep commitment leads us into relationships with other authentic selves. And in entering into those relationships that are sacred in the true meaning of that word, we cannot help but bring our collective power to bear against the forces of injustice, hatred, and oppression. Our collective wholeness will, by definition, heal the world. I would like to wrap up this sermon series by telling you one more story about Forest Church. Forrest had what I consider to be a very public spiritual practice that he engaged in every week. Each Sunday, he would conclude his sermons with the words, "Amen, I love you, and may God bless us all." Just weeks before his death, he explained to his successor, Reverend Galen Gingrich, why he said, "I love you," at the end of his sermons. "When I say I love you from the pulpit," he told Galen, "something connects. I get connected to the congregation, and they get connected to each other. It's almost like, for a moment, at least, we are part of each other, of something larger than ourselves. It's the human form of love divine, as Blake put it. And besides," Church went on, "someone once told me that I'm the only person in her life who ever says, 'I love you.' She comes to church to hear someone say that she matters." We all yearn to be told that we matter, that our true selves are worthy of love and capable of loving. In our common humanity, we share our vulnerabilities and our sensitivities, and we offer them up here on the altar of hope. I pray today that we may each find it within us, each and every day, to want what we have, to do what we can, and to be who you are. Amen. I love you. May God bless us all.